Okay, I am going to get started, and I'm delighted to see all these impressive women here. What a good group we have. Please sit in the front. That's we need people to sit in the front. Exactly. Well, I'm Lillian Stenfeld, and I'm chair of the Women's Forum here at Sedgwick, and I'm also chair of the bankruptcy group here. And I'm welcoming you all to the program today, Breaking New Ground, Lessons from a Leader. We have Sharon Allen here, who you'll hear more about, and we have Cindy Zollinger, who will be a facilitator to in our fireside chat. The only thing we're missing is the fire up on the screen here.
Just imagine it.
Yeah, imagine a fire on these screens. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the firm very quickly. I'm going to introduce both Cindy and Sharon to you. So that's what I'm doing, and I'll try to wrap it up, although I have to say with these two women I could spend the whole hour talking about their accomplishments. So I won't do that, though. So I'm going to be very roughshod over all of their many accomplishments. So first, welcome to Sedgwick. And we have 400 attorneys, and we have 15 offices. We're in California, New York, Texas, Washington, New Jersey, Illinois, Florida, DC, and also London and Bermuda. And where's Kathleen? Did I miss any? Did I miss any? I'm on there. And we just opened in Miami. That's our most recent office. So we're proud. This is a first ever event. We have partnered with our colleagues at Cornerstone, and we're really happy about that because we have not done any event with them so far. Maybe this will become an annual event. So Cindy Zollinger is the facilitator for today, and she is co-founder of Cornerstone, where she serves right now as president and CEO. She co-founded Cornerstone in 1989 and has grown the company to 500 employees. And these are not just any employees, I have to say. If you've been mingling with the Cornerstone people, they're all PhDs and master's degrees, and they're in economics, and they're really a very impressive group of consultants. And what they do is it's a financial and economics consulting firm. They provide economic testimony for companies in litigation. And Cindy has led the Menlo Park office. She's served on the executive committee and the board of directors. She holds an MBA from the prestigious University of Chicago in a bachelor's degree from Wellesley. And she teaches at the Stanford Graduate School of Business and at the law school. So that is our facilitator. And then I'm delighted also to be able to introduce to you our main speaker, Sharon Allen. And one of the many people from Deloitte that are here said, oh, I'm so excited because Sharon Allen, she's famous within Deloitte. And I said, she's famous like worldwide. I mean, it's not like, she's like really a big deal. So we are very lucky to have her here. She's a national treasure. So, and she's done just a tremendous amount for women in her career. So she is former chairman of the board of Deloitte. And in that job, she did it for 8 years, from 2003 to 2011. She was responsible for no less than 60,000 employees. And that's like just mind-boggling when you think of it. That's like a pretty good-sized city. And she's responsible for their livelihoods. I mean, that's... and she is a thought leader, and during that time, she has pushed Deloitte to ever more innovative programs. Our Sedgwick Women's Forum early on we recognized Deloitte as the leader on women's issues and diversity issues, and we were smart enough, Kathleen Flynn and I, our marketing director, were smart enough to hook up with one of Sharon's colleagues, Carrie Francis. And she's been on our outside advisory board for the last 9 years, and has really been instrumental in helping us to get going with our 400 employees to do the best program we can and provide opportunities for our women and our women clients as well. So the Sharon Allen I could talk about for over an hour easily. It's just amazing. But she has led the board of directors of Deloitte in providing oversight and guidance to their management team. She has had a career of 38 years in audit and consulting work. She's been the relationship partner for many multinational corporations, and her list of first is just monumental. She was the first managing partner of any Deloitte office. When you think about that, that's pretty remarkable. She was the first woman on their board of directors ever in 1994. She was their first regional managing partner for the Pacific Southwest, which is the second largest region in the United States, which is a big deal. And of course, the biggest thing is she was the first chairman of the board of Deloitte, and that's significant in that it's the highest ranking woman of all the 60,000 employees there, and it's indeed was the first woman chairman of the board of any professional service organization. That's law firms, accounting firms, and everything. So it's really very very important. She was also a member. She didn't just do the North America, but she's a member of the board of directors was a member of the board of directors of the global Deloitte, and sat on the governance and risk management committees. In her spare time, she was chair. She did a number of things always in the community. Her community service is fabulous, and she's very proud of that. I talked to her earlier about it. She was chairman of the board of the National YMCA, which is a great organization. I grew up in the YMCA in my little town in New England. That was the only spot, the only type of place for young people to go to. She sits now on the board of Catalyst and also the Bank of America. She is is very involved at the leadership level with the Harvard Business School, and she's just generally recognized as a thought leader everywhere. She usually, when she's not speaking to us here, this humble group, she is speaking all across the country to different groups like the Commonwealth Club here. She's been taught at the Boston Club, the Cleveland Club, the Dallas Club, all across the country. I can't even tell you all of them, but she's spoken to the Forbes Executive Forum. She's talked to the United Nations Economic Development Fund, and for Fortune magazine, and then of course for Cornerstone in Sedgwick. We're down to like a footnote on the bottom somewhere. She's taught at Cornell, Duke, Howard, University of Illinois, Notre Dame, University of Pittsburgh, Stanford, University of Texas, USC, and imparted some of her wisdom to them as well.
Don't forget the University of Idaho.
Oh, University of Idaho. She's from Boise, Idaho, so that's why that's important. That's where she started her career. Many honors. She's been recognized over the years, over her 38 years, and it's incredible. I mean, basically, the one that I like the best is the Forbes list of the most powerful women, not in the United States, but in the world. She has been on that list year after year after year. I mean, that's quite a list. If you think about worldwide, who's the most powerful woman in the world? She is. So right here, over and over again. She's been listed, just to give you a few more, and I really, I'm skipping over a lot of the lesser honors that most of us would be delighted with achieving just that one honor, but she also has been named one of the most powerful people in New York, most influential people in corporate governance in the country, and Woman of the Year as well. And I'm not telling you all of them because I know you want to hear from her and not just the list of all these awards. But if there's any award out there, Sharon has gotten it. So I'll say that. So without further ado, I will turn it over. So we will have our fireside chat, and I'm looking forward to it too. Thank you.
Well, I want to say first, thank you to Sedgwick for this wonderful opportunity to partner with you on this event. I mean, you certainly are a leader in your development of the Women's Forum, and you've been an inspiration to all of the women at Cornerstone. So thank you very much. And I also have to say how honored I am to be having this conversation with Sharon. I mean, that is just amazing, and it's really deeply honored, and we're all looking forward to
What
your
we will
insights.
find quickly is that, all the wonderful things, thank you for that beautiful introduction, is, I've been retired now for 2 years, and it's amazing how quickly you go from who's who to who's she. So just know that and understand that that's all a matter of perspective.
You'll always be Sharon, who is a who's who for all of us. So Sharon, you've had this amazing leadership journey, and at age 5, did you want to be chairman of Deloitte? I mean, what was your journey like, and when did you realize that you were a leader?
Well, it is interesting because I actually grew up on a farm in Idaho. And so I certainly would never have imagined, I wouldn't have known what an accountant was, much less what Deloitte was. But I did graduate from the University of Idaho and started in Boise, Idaho, and was there for a number of years. Did a lot of things nationally, but, really developed my career there in Boise, and then started moving. Portland for a couple of years, Los Angeles, where I was the regional managing partner there. And there was about 2,500 people in that region at that time. That was more than my hometown. So it kind of put it in perspective about that journey. But I think that I just had the good fortune of being able to have some good mentors and good sponsors and people who helped me along the way. And all the time recognizing that you also had to really prove yourself each step along that way. And as you know, you don't go about early in your career necessarily knowing where it will end up. Who'd have known you'd found your own firm and become the CEO and so on. But it evolves, and you identify the next step and then the next step. And I think it is important to take it step at a time, but also have aspirations out in front of you to keep the growth and keep the momentum going. And I had the good fortune again of being in an organization. I was the same organization for 38 years. And my husband always tells me, yes, but if you'd done the same thing every year for 38 years, you would never have done that. But everything was different, and each step along the way, and had the good fortune of having the opportunity to do that.
You mentored mentors and sponsors.
Right.
Could you talk about how they helped you along that way?
Absolutely. I think it's interesting. Just in the last few years, I think we at Deloitte at least had identified the distinction between a mentor and a sponsor. And up to that point, had always talked about those many speeches I give, the importance of both having and being a mentor. I mean, I had a number of them during the course of my career. But I think when I then look back, when we started really identifying the distinction between a mentor and a sponsor, I could look back and say I had those sponsors as well. And, the difference being a mentor, I think, is someone who looks out for you and helps you and gives you advice and good, kind of a friend and so on. But a sponsor is somebody who will do those things, but also pound the table for you. You're somebody who will make sure that you are being recognized for what you're doing and get that next step and that next opportunity. And honestly, I can look back and say I had some great mentors who helped me a lot, but didn't really sponsor me. But I had those few really big opportunities that I had absolutely came from the sponsors who were dedicated to making sure something was going to happen with my career and meaningfully also within the firm. I mean, because when I became the regional managing partner in Southern California, that was because our then CEO said, we don't have a woman in a managing partner role for a region, and we're going to make that change. And he kind of came to me and said, you do this, here's 3 regions, which one do you want? And that's sponsorship, right?
Yeah. So your mentors and sponsors were men because you were first?
They were. There weren't many women around to do that, although I had a great mentor and sponsor that was not within the firm, but was a top executive at a company called Boise Cascade in Boise at the time. And she still today is a great friend and advisor. So I wasn't totally devoid of having any women in that process, but within the firm at the time, it was pretty much men.
So, Sharon, you were chairman of Deloitte during the credit crisis. I'm sure that was a piece of cake. So, can you share with us some of the challenges of that period and how you dealt with them?
Well, it's so interesting because when I think back on my career, there were actually several financial crises along the way. When you've been around for 40 years, I guess that happens, right? Although I will say the most recent was the most significant and the most severe. But even before that, probably the most significant challenge I had as the chairman was when it was, I took on that role in 2003. So think, Anderson has just gone down. Sarbanes-Oxley has just become a reality. All the other firms had decided to say, all the other big 8, 6, 5, 4 firms, and we call it the Final Four now, had separated their consultancies. And I was elected chairman just as we were making the decision to separate the consultancy out of Deloitte. And timing wasn't great, for any kind of services firm at the time. The economy at that time was in the dumps. Yeah. And we had to make a decision about whether we really were going to make that separation. We decided not to because it was such a significant, we actually as a board, and again, this was just as I had been elected chairman and I was going into the role, and we as a board had to decide whether we were going to make that separation or not, and believed it could have put both firms at risk. And so and by the time we got to that point, we figured out we had separated the marketplace instead of separating our firm. Because we have less than 25% of the major companies as audit clients, which leaves a huge market for consulting that we could do work for. So we made a big decision, kept the consultancy and reintegrated as an organization. And that was my first couple of years as chairman of Deloitte, and kind of overseeing that in the U.S. And then, fast forward to a time when, the economy really did hit hard and so many crises arose. And, I think the most important thing by that time, we as an organization had become very strong. As an organization, we had reorganized, we'd structured in a way that allowed us to respond appropriately to difficult financial times. And we'd learned how to do scenario planning. We'd done scenario planning. The board, had actually pushed our executive team to present, enough scenarios. Actually, wasn't quite enough. There were a couple of worse ones that didn't quite go far enough. And we'd learned to run the business as a business. And fortunately, that was really good for our organization, and it was good for our clients because it stabilized the firm, it stabilized our relationship with our clients. And as difficult a time as it was, we would never have been able to quite get that done had it been 20 years ago before we'd undertaken a lot of those changes. So it's what a changing time and learning environment we were going through as an organization, and kind of supporting our clients along the way in the process. And those that didn't, you ended up in your practice.
So the Deloitte is known as a firm that has really had some wonderful initiatives with respect to women, and I understand you did a survey of ethics and the workplace, and we would be interested in hearing, what that was about and what some of the initiatives coming out of that were.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I am, as I say, I'm proud of the firm because we actually undertook our initiative for the advancement and retention of women over 20 years ago. And I have to say it made a difference to me. It made a difference to a lot of people within the organization, women and men alike. I mean, I think that's one of the most important things that we've learned through our initiatives is how important it is to, across the workplace, not only for the women, but importantly for the women. And, you know, the decision that we made to undertake that initiative those many years ago was actually undertaken by the then chairman and CEO. We later separated the roles, but our then chairman and CEO, who, you know, many would say, how would he would never get it, right? But he and, you know, kind of looked across the organization and realized that while we've been saying, oh, wait for the women to be around long enough, they'll get to the partnership just as fast as the men, and looking across the organization, figuring out that was far from the truth. I mean, we were hiring women by then at 50%, and less than 10% of our new partners were women. Now, there was a certain amount of time, but it wasn't timing back then. They'd been there plenty long. And so, you know, you had to just kind of stop and say, it's not just the right thing to do, it is actually an economic reality that we had to face to say, why is it women are leaving at a faster pace? And we didn't just assume why they were leaving at a faster pace. We actually did a study to analyze it. And we had some surprising results, including, you know, that women, they weren't, you know, leaving to stay home and raise children, although that's a perfectly acceptable alternative. I mean, it's a good alternative for those who want to choose that. But that's not why the majority of our women were leaving. They were leaving because they had more flexibility in other organizations. They were had more mentors, people that were watching out for them. And probably the most important thing we learned is that they were leaving for better opportunities, because we often were not giving women the best assignments because we were worried they were going to leave, so they left. I mean, it's this cycle that you get into, right? And so a lot of years later now, fast forward through a lot of different initiatives and different things we've learned, and every year we're still learning. Those of you with the light will say, it's not perfect yet, is it? There's a long ways yet to go. But we've learned a lot over the years, including how important it is to have a culture of flexibility and having an opportunity to assure that we're looking at assignments in appropriate ways and giving opportunity. There's always a woman in the mix as we're thinking about the, you know, leadership roles and assignments and so on. I mean, there's just so many things. And we've had some breakthrough initiatives, including our mass career customization and a lot of other kinds of things that we look to assure that our women can, you know, advance at the pace and in the way that they want along with the men.
Do you have advice to us as we go back to our organizations about how to make that happen?
Well, yes. I mean, I think one of the most important things is that the people who are leading the organization have to be bought in. Now, it's interesting, as I was learning about Cornerstone, by the way, and talking to some of you who were at Cornerstone, not you specifically, they said, well, we've always had women, and they're, what would you say, a third of our leadership or our partners. So it kind of was natural around Cornerstone. It's not natural in every organization. So but you have to have people who are at the top that are committed to making a difference, again, for a culture of flexibility and the kinds of things that it requires in order to, you know, assure the advancement and the retention of women and minorities and, you know, everyone that you want to assure that you're giving the right opportunities to. So leadership, absolutely important. Don't make any assumptions about why people are making the decisions they are without asking. A lot of times, by the way, people making assumptions are making the wrong assumptions when they, even in terms of assignments or individuals on different kinds of projects. So, and then having some visible ways to coach, support, and sponsor women. You know, I think we could all say over time it'll all work itself out. It won't for a very, very long time if we don't make some proactive moves. So had Bill Perrette not said, Sharon, you're going to be a regional managing partner and you're going to go, you know, one of these places, you know, give me the opportunity, it wouldn't have happened. And I wasn't the logical, likely candidate to go to Los Angeles, take on that role. But people have to make tough decisions to make a difference. so I always say, don't just assume things will take care of themselves, because they may, but none of us will be around to see it. Just a little bit of that.
I think we talked today, these days a lot about work-life balance. And we would be interested in hearing, what does that mean at Deloitte? What did it mean? But also, what did it mean for you personally as you were progressing in your career?
Well, I think one of the things that we started doing is referring to it as work-life fit instead of work-life balance, because balance it connotes that things are really in balance, and we all know things are never in balance, right? So if everything is one thing or another is always a little bit more demanding or taking a little bit more disproportionate amount of time than something else in your lives, and whether it's personal or professional or whatever it is you're doing. And I think the important thing is to, and that what Deloitte talks about is figuring out a way to fit your work into your life and your life into your work. And my belief is that that's always going to be a personal choice. I can't tell you the number of times that somebody else could, kind of create an expectation for you, or a demand for you, or how you should make it work. The fact is, you have to make it work, how it's going to work for you. And it's different for everybody. And I think we can't expect it's going to be perfect, because it likely never will be perfect. But finding a way to have things have an even keel over time, and most of the time, is important. And you make tough decisions in doing that. And so you may make decisions at different points in your career to accelerate or decelerate depending on what's going on in your world at the time. And that's okay, because, and it's interesting, as we talked about that at Deloitte for a while, we actually profiled the executives at the time when I was still chairman, and we had a different CEO then and so on, in our careers. And we said, okay, put your life cycle for the firm in see how it looked. And we've all made choices over the course of time. Everybody assumed, well, you're chairman, you've been 150% every moment, every day, for your whole career. Well, everybody makes choices at different points in time. Our then CEO had taken 2 years where he didn't travel and didn't do a lot of things because he had a son who was very sick, and he stayed close to home. Everybody makes those choices at different points in time. Sometimes you're just not very transparent about it, and so people don't think you ever do that. But it's important to do that.
What would some of the biggest challenges or maybe even obstacles that you faced as you were progressing?
Well,
leadership in your career.
I think one of the challenges was, of course, making decisions about whether I would move or not move, and all of those kinds of things. Being a 2-career family, my husband had his own business. It was based in Boise, and so I stayed. Actually, I was based in the Boise office for 23 years, which seems like a very long time for in today's world, particularly. And people would, there were a lot of times when people would say, well, you need to move in order to get the bigger opportunity and the bigger clients and the bigger pay and so on. And but it just, for us, it was a decision we needed to make. So that was one of those challenges.
Yeah, right. And it's also an example of the fit.
But it was part of the fit. That was my fit. And then one of the challenges was that I had said no for so long that when Rich sold his business, and there were a few people said, oh, well, Rich sold his business, so why can't you move? But no one ever made an effort to move me, to give me that next chance. So I actually had to create that opportunity for myself. I actually had to say, you know what, I'm kind of here and nobody's noticing and asking anymore. So I saw that the managing partner in Portland was retiring, and I said, it's not where I wanted to be for the rest of my career, but it was a move that would move me. So I had to push the then regional managing partner to actually move me to Portland. And then I was back on a track. And then, you know, as I said, 2 years later, I was kind of well on my way in the regional managing role. But that was a challenge. You know, you go through all those years of people asking, and then no one's asking anymore. And so it's one of those challenges you have to kind of figure out your way around.
I want to give an opportunity for others to, I have lots of questions, but I know that you have questions for Sharon. And any?
Yeah.
First of all, it's really an honor to have both of you here. Because to have a good role models for us to look up to is really amazing. From your impressive resume, it seems to me like you work very well with men. And I'm still learning it. Can you share some lessons learned?
Lesson learned about working well with men. There's so many things I could say. That wouldn't be appropriate. No. You know, I think, let's see, over the years, I think I learned that I had to, first of all, be myself. And I, you know, back when I started, of course, a lot of years ago, I, you know, thought I had to dress like them and act like them. You know, I had the cute little white shirts and little bow ties and the navy blue suits and the whole thing. And, you know, that was all fine and good back then. But, you know, I figured out that the best thing I could do was leverage my own style and my own strength. And I suspect, Cindy, that's worked for you as well. I mean, I think that when you figure out your own strength and style and then develop your own confidence, that's what works the best. And I think that also, I always felt it was important to prove myself, but there was a bit of a burden on me, I think, early in my career about that, because I was the first woman in many of the roles that I had. But it was more important for me to think about the next and the next and the next. And so it was proving yourself and just doing the good job and getting the next role and the next role because you did a great job, not because you were a woman. You know, having a chip on my shoulder, which was easy to do back then, and there was a lot of people who talked a lot about that around the women's movement, and bless their hearts, frankly, because they made the way for many of us. But you don't have to have a chip on your shoulder, not in today's world particularly. You really have to just be yourself and prove yourself, and I think that's one of the most important things. And I will say, I actually think one of the real benefits that, and I don't like to generalize, but I think there is some generalization to this, that I had was having emotional intelligence. And I think women disproportionately have that capability. And I think we can use it to our advantage, especially in today's world of collaboration, team building, the types of things that are so important to success in today's businesses. And I think women actually have it disproportionately in some cases. Not to say, again, that's a generalization, and you know that never works perfectly. But I think leveraging on that is important.
So what would you identify as your strengths, and how did you discover them?
The question was, what are the strengths and how were they discovered? I think, well, I mentioned emotional intelligence, and I think that was the most important strength that I had, especially as the chairman of the board. I think reading a room, understanding a room, you know, especially a room full of men, which was the case for so many years, was really helpful to me. I could negotiate, I could facilitate, I could do things that didn't seem to somehow be in the mindset of some of the others that were around the table. I absolutely have the technical competencies and capabilities, but I wasn't the absolute brilliant person in the class. I think I had that kind of rounded set of experiences, and I always knew it was important to leverage that. And I think I'm also kind of a no bullshit person, and I think that worked well for me through the course of my career. I didn't, you know, many people would say, you know, you go to play politics in the big organization, and you know, what I think you have to do is be politically astute, but not necessarily political. And there's a big difference, and I think it carried me well during the course of my career. So I, over time, learned to communicate better and always challenge myself to try to do more of that, better at that. But those skills were absolutely necessary in the course of my career and eventually, especially as chairman. So those are a few things that I think played well for me. Again, you didn't hear me talk about the debits and the credits. They were important things.
Best auditor.
I know, I was the best. I was good at that, but that's the whole thing.
Nora Wetzel from Sedgwick. I was just curious, do you think that you were born a leader, or were those leadership skills something that you had to cultivate and work at and develop over your life?
Yes. I think both. I actually think, you are born with a certain set of competencies, I think, or at least you develop them because of your environment to a degree. So I was fortunate, I grew up, as I mentioned, on a farm, and I was still surrounded by strong women. That was helpful, I think, to me as in terms of role models. And I think that I did have a certain set of competencies. By the way, I was the fourth of 4 girls on the farm.
Oh.
My name, I think, was Robert Carl for 2 weeks because they wanted a voice so bad. I mean, who's going to farm, for heaven's sake? And but I think, there were certain competencies that were there, but I think a lot of it was learned from watching, evolved, practiced, and improved. And I was talking to some of you earlier tonight. I actually, right through the end when I was the chairman, I was still trying to be better this year than I was last. I was still trying to do that. And I would even, I was doing a lot of speaking back then. As you see, I don't do speeches anymore. I just love these fireside chats, because it's easier. And I like to do them. But I was doing a lot of speeches back then, and we would take copies of videos, if some places that were doing videos, and we'd take a look at them. And I had a chief of staff who would take sections and say, see what you did there? That was really effective. You see that what you did there? That really stunk. And so don't do that anymore. And it was kind of this self-improvement process that I just felt like you always keep doing. And so there's skills and leadership capabilities I think you can practice. And there's some of it that's kind of in your mind and not there.
So, obviously things have changed a lot over the past
40 years.
40 years.
Go ahead and say it. I know.
And I think in terms of placement of women, it's a lot better than it was before. What is it that we can do for each other, though, that is unique in this particular period of time?
Terrific question, because I think there was a certain amount of time as I was coming along through the organization that I was disappointed to see that women didn't tend to support other women as well as they might have. I don't know why, maybe because many of us, like myself, grew up in the organization, professionally grew up in the organization just around men, and so it wasn't comfortable. Maybe we felt like it was going to, I don't know how many of you have been in this situation. I know that Cindy and I both have, where we're in a room and of a room full of men, and you couldn't possibly sit together and talk, for heaven's sakes. They would give you a hard time because the women are, talking to one another. Well, yes. But it wasn't, it was one of those things that was just, right? I mean, they just kind of, I think we didn't naturally provide the kind of sponsorship and mentorship and the help to one another as we can and should today. Because, when you look around and think about that in the context of professional services firms, corporations, whatever organization you're working in, the men have been doing it for years. And it's time for the women to do it as well. And we're still evolving, I think, as a gender in that regard. And we really need to step it up and think about how we help one another. And that's not to say that's all you're going to do, because that wouldn't be productive. But to watch out for one another and not worry that somebody's going to say, oh, well, you did that just because she's a woman. Now, they don't say that to the men, but it's just the reality still today that that's the case. So I think, I'm encouraged that there are many more forums. There's many more opportunities where people can discuss, debate, share, and so on. And that I see much more focus by women as well as men, but by women to help other women succeed. And it's an absolute imperative.
With the exception of the period of time where you had said no for so long and you needed to, seek out the next opportunity, did you ever need to find sponsorship yourself? Did you ever really need to approach someone in a more formal way, rather than just being acknowledged and, by someone else who saw the work you were doing and took the liberty?
Yes, I think there was probably about a 2-year period that I would say I was kind of without a mentor, and it was in some ways very good for me as I moved on during the course of my career and became, more and more in roles where I could influence the importance of mentoring in the organization, because I saw how important it was to me. When I was without a mentor for that period of time, I went, wow, I've always just had one or two, and I realized the difference. And so it was during that time I probably was much more proactive about looking around and saying, who is my mentor now? And by the way, I think a lot of times we make it too hard. When you do sit back and look around, I think a lot of times your mentors are a lot more, they're there and you just haven't quite identified it as such. Now the sponsors are different, because again, that's table pounder, right?
Yeah, that's why I use that term specifically, because
the sponsors are absolutely ones which, you have to sometimes be more proactive with. You have to get in their face, literally, in an appropriate way. You do it in your own style. Again, everybody does that differently. But making sure that you find a way to be clear about what you've accomplished, how you're contributing to the organization, and that they don't forget about you.
And also what you want, I assume. It's like...
Very good point, Cindy, absolutely. Because people could make it, again, those assumptions about what you want to do. And it may not be anywhere near close to what you really want to do. Yeah,
and actually, this has come up in my organization quite often, where people have a tendency to talk about things that may or may not be happening. And the question has come back, what is it that you want? Which has really forced people to think, to identify. And I think that's really difficult, but if you can do that, there's a lot of opportunity. We have a tendency to
that's right.
Focus on what may not be happening rather than what it is actually you really want, and making that known.
And if you're not willing to step up and say, then you're missing an opportunity. And that could be both personally and your own career and profession, and then more wholly looking at it as an organization. Because you go back 20 plus years ago in Deloitte, and our then chairman and CEO asked the question of the women there were a group of women in the room, small group of women in the room, leaders, who said, well, my people are leaving because this just isn't a great place to be sometimes. Well, why? And they started going through, just to your point, well, here's some of the things you need to think about. They were willing organizationally to put it out there. And sometimes that's not easy to do, but it is absolutely imperative that you do it.
I think my question got partly answered, but in that what you want vein, there's a woman who's a leader of a law firm who was saying that in her office, the men come in and they say, this is what I want from you, the office head, for my career development. And that the women come in and say, here's what I'm worried I'm not doing well. And that's basically the difference from her experience. And she said, and that makes, from her experience, that is the difference in terms of kind of how so I guess I was curious if that resonates with you, and I think it kind of connects to what you were talking about. But
Well, first of all, I think there is something to that. I think there is a lot of research that has been done, that there are different styles, that women and men do actually think differently. Not one better than the other, but differently. And in fact, one of the things that Deloitte actually did was, which I don't know if any of you know Kathy Benko, but she is a person that is actually based in San Francisco, although she has a national role with Deloitte, and she was our women's initiative leader for a while, and she's very, very smart. She is brilliant, and so she came up with this idea of doing training about women as buyers. Okay, so the objective was to help all of our men think more appropriately about how to extend services and provide services to their clients that were women. And of course, by doing that, it was opening up a lot of things that were, these aha moments. But of course, she didn't mention that. But it was a really good and important process. And we used a set of research that had been done as the basis for this training. And it really, I learned from it. I went through it, and I learned from it. It was really, even little things about how men and women do things differently. Like, women tend, according to this research, to actually have eye contact when they talk, and men many times don't. Again, generalization, not all happens. Women tend to nod when they understand. Men tend to nod when they agree. So, our men are, in the room making a pitch for services, and the woman is nodding, and they think, sold. And it's all she means is, I understand. I don't necessarily agree, but I understand. It's so interesting how people really do tend to think a little differently, and understanding that and being willing to then deal with that is important. To your point, I think women tend not to beat their own drum enough. They just don't. Having said that, a lot of times when they do, they're considered a pushy broad.
Right.
Go figure, right? So you have to find that balance that works for you, making sure people know what you're doing for the organization while still, not, being considered the pushy broad. It's not fair. It's just so. So you figure it out, and you work with it. And then when the women run the world, it'll be the other way. And things will be better.
I have a question. I'm involved in an association that is in the construction industry. And we have a lot of young women involved in our organization. And they're young project managers and young project engineers. And they're very happy with their situation. And in fact, they will tell you that there is no discrimination between genders. And yet, as an older woman who views this situation with a perspective toward what's their upward mobility, we're trying to mentor them and explain gently that there is an issue that may arise in the future. And I'm wondering if you have any advice to us on how to present that in a fashion that's not off-putting or outside their experience.
Well, Cindy, you want to answer that one?
It's a challenge because you're talking about something that they have not experienced, right?
Correct.
And you also, I would think, you would want to be careful because you don't want them to experience the world in a way in which it's not happening by affecting their perception of the world. Now I would be there trying to mentor at every step and look for be careful about situations that look like they're the situations that you're worried about.
It is an interesting dynamic.
Yeah.
And because the women who are older, who've experienced the path or the road that you've been on or have experienced in your life, see in the future that these women are at a level, they're not in management positions and they're not at the glass ceiling. And we know that that's where women want to get. And it's a little bit hard to encourage them to push for that when they think it's going to be a natural progression and we're worried that it may not be that way for them. So
I think, and it is, to your point, Cindy, I mean, it's kind of hard not to say, look, I walked to school uphill both ways. It was, you're in the snow. Right? I mean, we went through such a different time. And so it's hard not to put it into that context. And yet, it won't be like that for them in the future, but it still might, but there will likely, and unless things change a lot in the very near future, will still be different for them. I find it, I see it. I see them as they move and progress through the organization. They start seeing it. But the good thing is I start seeing them doing something about it. And so, in some ways, this I benefited from a bit of naivety when I was a young professional, because I thought, why wouldn't I be able to do whatever I wanted to do? And a little naivety is a good thing as long as it's not taken to an extreme and people roll over you in the process. So making sure that, I think that the forums, that helping them be around good women role models and seeing how they interact, I think there's a realization that comes over time. Well, there's something in me that says, thank goodness, that they don't see it when they're young professionals.
it is
great.
It is wonderful in one sense.
In one sense.
Yes.
But you are right, I think, to be worried that there have to be people looking out for what will happen in the future and continue to, blaze the trail to assure that they have those opportunities.
Will hopefully be an organic progression for them.
Right. Right.
Thank you.
I'm Dina Older Aguilar with Cornerstone. I was wondering if you could talk about the ways in which initiatives for women helped men at Deloitte, and also just kind of helped the bottom line of Deloitte.
Yeah, I think when you consider, how do you move? One of your questions before is how do you get them to move in this kind of an organizational change kind of way? And I think that it's important for, again, in people within an organization to recognize that it is actually good for the bottom line. So if we look back to the original time frame that we were undertaking the initiative at Deloitte, and we did the research that I mentioned, we put into place a lot of programs and initiatives and so on that have evolved and changed and so on, of course, over 20 years. But early in that first 6 or 7 years, we could see a significant improvement in retention. And you can convert that to a bottom line, so that it was tens of millions of dollars that we were saving as an organization because we had improved retention. And, you think about what turnover costs in a professional services organization, or in any organization for that matter, and we could convert it. And so it was easier then to say, there's demonstration here that this is worth the investment and the effort. So that was one thing to try to help move, and that there is an important part of that. And I think we actually undertook some programs. I mentioned the Women in Fires, which actually had a good impact, but we undertook a program called Men and Women as Colleagues early on in the process, which helped people have a better understanding of how different we do think, So programs like that, investing in programs like that, I think actually helped to bring the men along. And I think over time it became clear what the benefit was. I thought one of the real moments for me was in the boardroom one time when I don't even remember, we were talking about some other initiative, and one of the men in the room said, we have to get to the point where we can be like our women's initiative, where we're the leaders, and and I went, Good deal. You know? And we have for years been considered that, and it's, boy, I'll tell you, it has been such an important thing for us culturally and as an organization. Now, once again, the risk in that is you can't lose focus on it. And honestly, we have Deloitte at times too. You just kind of keep on it. You kind of say you can't lose that edge. But we at Deloitte kind of had the lead on it, and then the other firms came along, and great. That's a good thing because they caught up in terms of the recruitment and so on. So then you have to think of the next thing to put you ahead, because it changed the profession, not just our firm. I don't know if I answered your question and all that. It's just kind of, it's really an interesting process.
You've spoken about finding your own strengths and working with people around you. I'm interested in asking you about how you found clarity in figuring out what it is that you do want. We were talking about that as well. And I find for myself that there are opportunities, but I also feel like I'm my own obstacle sometimes. And I don't beat my own drum, I don't know how to have the perspective on that for myself to appropriately leverage the women and men around me that are willing to be the mentors and sponsors. I don't know how to leverage them because I sometimes feel naturally inclined to want to pull myself towards more volunteer activities and more home-based activities, and I don't have a clarity around where I want to take myself in my future and where I see myself in my future. And even if I do imagine it, I don't see that as a reality for myself. So my question to you is, how do I fill that gap? How do I get myself there? And I know you were saying it's also based on the person. You have to align that for yourself.
It's just such a great question, and one I think people, really do struggle with a lot. So I'll say a few things. First of all, I don't know if any of you have read the Sheryl Sandberg's kind of thing about don't take yourself out before someone else takes you out. I mean, she's got and I think there's even the summary of what she thinks about this, which I think is pretty good, which is basically, don't assume you can't do something and then and then have somebody decide, oh, well, apparently she can't. Sometimes I think women make a choice that's easier, or think, oh, I can't do this, when in fact a man might say, I can do this. So ask yourself, is it really because you don't want to do it, or because you don't want to fail and you don't want somebody else to tell you can't do it? And that's something only an individual can decide. As hard as that is. But I think keeping, that the clarity you talked about, not trying to be clear out here necessarily, because there's a lot of steps along the way to get clear out there. I was always pretty clear about what was the next opportunity, and that was easier for me. Go back to you say, did you ever imagine being chairman of the firm? Well, really not even until I was in Los Angeles as a regional managing partner. Elections were coming up. The partners elected to the role, and people started saying, well, Sharon, that would be a good job for you. And I started imagining myself in that. But it was the other steps along the way. So you can't, I think it's important to be able to take it step by step, and to not, as I say, don't take yourself out. Make a choice about what you're wanting to do. And by the way, people who make choices about saying, okay, at this moment, this is where I need to be, is fine. But don't do it just because you think somebody else is going to tell you that's where you need to be. And do you have additional advice?
Totally agree. I think that I know I always suffered from severe lack of confidence, right? And I thought, one of the things I thought recently was, gosh, it would be interesting to know how my life would have been if I have the level of confidence I have today, which is still, not, it's lacking, at an earlier stage. But it is I think just putting your trying and doing and working hard and succeeding at it. And Sharon said, I always look 5 years. I mean, I could not look further than. And so, what do I want to be doing now? And am I happy with what I'm doing?
That's right. Always
That's
asking.
really important in terms of sort of what you want to do. Am I happy with what I'm doing? And if not, well, how do I change things so that I am happy with what I'm doing?
Gosh, I think I've got lots of questions, but I guess one of them is, do you have any kids? It may be too much of a personal question, but I mean, I really love what I do, and now I'm finding that I'm 40. Like, gosh, I haven't even had kids or anything like that, and do I really want it? I'm not sure. But how did you kind of combine that into your life? And I know I've heard a lot of women speak and say, it hasn't been a problem. And I don't think it is, because I think you can make everything fit into your life. But one of the things that I think about right now as well, I'm the CFO of our company, is I don't want to talk about it too much, because I don't want people to think, oh, well, 2-3 years down the road, we don't know where it's going to go with her. You know what I mean?
Because you don't know. Then so why would they make an assumption, right?
Yeah, right, exactly. So that's my first one of my questions.
Well, I don't know about it. I don't have children, and it was interesting. A lot of people would say, well, then it's easier to do what you've done, and I do believe, particularly in the time that I did it, that's the case. I will also tell you there are very successful women within our organization who are my peers who do have children, and they are great kids who are very successful. I mean, most of them. But then that's always the case, right?
Right.
And we didn't have kids because we found ourselves making the decision. The only reason we wanted to have kids was so we wouldn't be alone when we were old, and that wasn't a good enough reason for us not to have children. And because there's no assurances anyway that you're not going to be alone when you're old. And so we're perfectly happy with our dogs and our nieces and nephews and our extended family. We were very close to our families, and so it happened to be a choice. And we actually made a choice, and it was a good choice for us. My husband has been very clear. He said, you would have been the worst helicopter mother in the world. It's a good thing we don't have kids, he said. But you make the choices, and all those choices are just fine. And in today's world, like many of us have talked beforehand, there are so many great combinations of how family units whatever the family unit, make it work, and that, whether it's the spouse or the partner or the whomever that stays home with the kids, may not be the woman, may not be the man, who knows. It works, but it has to be your personal choice. Yeah, that's, I don't know about you, but that's.
I have one child. He's now will be 26, and been a great joy. And being a parent is the hardest thing. I mean, running Cornerstone is a piece of cake.
See what good perspective it gives you? That's good.
But it's also, incredibly rewarding. And I think it's, and you can do it. And again, it's about choices, and it's about understanding how you get the support you need, because you can't do it by yourself, and sometimes women aren't very good about asking for help. And I think that it's really important for us to ask, not just in the work environment where, sort of ask, here's what I want and how can you help me? But it's also outside of work, and just like, I'm a superwoman, and I can't do all of this. So,
one of my partners who has several children, actually, and she's been a very successful partner at Deloitte. She was just the absolute best at outsourcing, in her personal life. So anything that wasn't value added to her and her kids and her husband, she outsourced. And I think that's an important thing to learn. Don't be cleaning those toilets when you don't have to. That's right.
So we have to wrap up. I have one last question, which is you shared, some wonderful stories and insights, and really it's been amazing, Sharon. It's just such it's been such a delight for me, and I know for the whole room. Do you have any sort of final lessons learned that you haven't covered already?
Well, there's so many lessons learned over a period of time, but I will leave you with a few thoughts, and some we've kind of maybe talked about a little bit, but one would be back to making sure that people know the job that you're doing. I was, and this is just an experience that I had an opportunity early in my career, which was a good thing, but that I was passed over for a promotion that I thought I should have had. And I kind of stomped into my supervisor's office at the time and said, I've done this, and, why didn't I get this early promotion? And he just kind of sat back and looked at me and he said, I didn't know you'd done all those things. And so, it was a great realization to me early that you really do have to make sure people know the things that you're doing, the value that you're bringing to an organization. And I think you can learn to do that without being a braggart. So I think that's one thing. We talked about mentors, and I think it's important for you to absolutely have a mentor, and it's important for you to be a mentor. Because you think about it, the world is never going to come out even if you only expect to have a mentor and not be one yourself. And I think that's some of the most rewarding opportunities you have in your careers as you develop is being a mentor to someone else. Some of the best moments in my career was when I watched people who had been good friends and I mentored become a partner in the organization. I mentioned being yourself, and I do think it is important. I always quote the old thing, be yourself, everyone else is taken. So just make sure you leverage that and be true to yourself as well. Very, very important that you're always true to yourself and making sure you're making the decisions that you know are right. And you kind of asked a question that I didn't really get into about the ethics in the workplace. And with the surveys that I did, you can go out and Google them and see the surveys on ethics in workplace and Sharon Allen. I did several surveys. One of them was about, I think people make good and better ethical decisions when not everything in their life is tied to their work. It allows you to make better decisions. So make sure you keep a good kind of perspective in your life. As well as work. And I always said my relationship with my husband, my family, all the things that are important to me were always more important than Deloitte. He is as important as Deloitte was. And so making good decisions was always, and that you're true to yourself in those decisions. And then I'll just finally say, being willing to get outside your comfort zone. So now some people would say, you were 24 years in Boise, Idaho. That wasn't really getting out of your comfort zone. But I did a lot of things during that time frame that really was out of my comfort zone. And more importantly, when I did start making the moves and moved to Los Angeles and did all of those kinds of things that were way outside my comfort zone, I got a lot better. And every time I got kind of comfortable where I was next, then it was time to make the move again. And it doesn't necessarily mean literally move. I'm not trying to get your people to move out of San Francisco or anything, but I mean move to something that, stretched you again and really made you better again. And getting outside your comfort zone will always help you do that. So I will kind of end with that. You don't need any more stories from me, but I just want to thank you all for it. It's such a pleasure to be here with you. You talk about what can you do for one another. I actually, in the last few years of my career, and even now today, I say one of the things that I am always willing to do, as long as it's kind of, on the way somewhere, traveling and where I'm going and so on, is helping women be all they can be. And giving back is so important to do that. And so it's a pleasure for me. What a great group, and what a wonderful group of professionals you all are. And thanks to my Deloitte colleagues that are here as well. And thank you, both of your firms, for sponsoring this. Drake and Cornerstone, amazing organizations. And now I can tell Carrie Francis she owes me one. Thanks so much.
There it is. At the other end. Hi, I'm Karen Ng from Sedgwick, and once again, I'd like to thank both of our wonderful speakers here for sharing their stories. And I don't know that for you guys, I mean, that hour went really fast for me. I could stay here for another 3 hours and it'll probably be fine. And I feel empowered just to be in the same room with you. And so, a small token of our appreciation from Cornerstone and Sedgwick, we have a gift for you.
Oh, how nice. I appreciate that very much. Thank you.
Okay, we're free. We're sprung. We've got to go now. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.